Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martin Spolz. I am head of unit in the European Commission, working on sustainable finance and fintech. Welcome to a very exciting panel. I hope that you will enjoy this hour with us. Before I introduce our distinguished speakers, and I'm really very honored to be on stage with such distinguished experts, in the field, let me say a few words about what sustainable finance is and why we are talking about sustainable finance so much. And we will certainly talk even more in coming months and years. Sustainable finance is a project that is trying to make sure that the financial sector is not only resilient itself and is able to face the challenges we are facing through environmental degradation and climate risks. These risks really pose a number of significant challenges for the financial sector itself. But the whole point of sustainable finance is to make sure that the financial sector in the first place supports the real economy and the businesses and all the sectors that have to go through a very important transition on their transition path. So it's not only about the risk side and making sure that everything is fine and we still keep financial stability, but obviously also to shift the trillions and to make sure that the financial sector works for the benefit not only of the financial sector, but ultimately to the benefit of society, of people, of the planet, of the consumers, of the corporates. Now, I will not give you a long speech, and this is really a privilege for me today not to speak that much, so I will give more opportunity to the speakers. But just to recall that we have a number of very important objectives and goals that the European Commission presented. First, the climate neutrality target to be achieved by 2050. We also have now presented a blueprint on how to meet the sustainability development goals. The next Commission, and I'm sure that you will hear more about it, has now the new Green Deal as the first priority. But to meet those goals, there are huge investment needs. And we are now attending a conference about research and innovation. And these investment needs cannot be covered by public funds only. It's logical, so we do need to also find ways how the capital markets, how not only capital markets, but financial markets, banks, insurance companies, pension funds, can reorient and should reorient the capital from where it is now to where it should be. Now, we have presented as the European Commission a very ambitious action plan on financing sustainable growth last year. I will not bother you with the details. There are three big objectives. The first one is to shift the trillions, reorient capital flows. The second one is making sure that the financial sector itself is resilient. And third, enhancing transparency and promoting long-termism. We have done a lot of work, but obviously what is really important now in the debate of the context of this conference is to have a serious debate how the tools and policy frameworks that we have developed at the European Commission can make an impact on the ground. And in the context of this conference, we are talking about research and innovation. That will be really the focus of the debate. We will investigate with those speakers what is working well, what has been working so well, what the policymakers have done, what they should be doing, what are the obstacles on the way for the financial sector, for the corporates. We will also hear from an independent think tank. We will also hear from an NGO. So the point of the debate today is to explore what needs to be done in the next 5 years under the new mandate of the Commission. So now let me go straight to the introduction of the panelists. I will start on my, I think that's better, yeah, indeed. So I will start with Alexandra Somftey, who is a diplomatic advisor to the Solar Impulse Project, led by Bertrand Piccard, representing an NGO voice. Then we have Hanna Luckiewicz, who is a senior trade and industry manager at BASF. So she will present the voice of a big, large corporate, facing also important challenges on the transition. Then we have Dawn Slevin, who is currently a managing director of Environmental Liability Solutions, ELS Europe, and of course, a very privileged member of the DG FISMA, the Commission Technical Expert Group on Sustainable Finance. I should have said that the Commission is working extremely closely with the private sector on this project, and Dawn is one of the stars with whom we have developed the first blueprint on taxonomy. So she will say a few words about that. And then we have Gwen Yu, who is the head of engagement transformation at the BNP Paribas group company engagement team. leading special project to accelerate business decision making based on the group sustainability commitments. And finally, I think that I did it in the right order, not only in terms of the gender balance, but also from the Commission point of view. We have Benjamin Hartmann, who is the head of the institutional team in the European Political Strategy Center of the European Commission. So he's not necessarily the colleague who you should blame for all the policies that the Commission has done, blame rather me. He is the one, I mean, who is really representing the think tank part of the Commission, which is obviously a little bit independent from the policy making. So with that, I suggest we kick off. We have planned with the panelists 2 rounds of questions. I will try to be as short as possible so that we also have some questions from you. I have been told that I should encourage you to look at the Slido where there is a code for this particular session, which is #R900. I will repeat, #R900. This is the event code. You will already find 2 questions there, so please feel free to answer them, and also feel free to ask any questions that you might have, because we will have at the end some time to answer those questions. So, Benjamin, I will start with you. I already explained, I mean, what we, in the Commission believe sustainable finance is, but can you say a few words from your perspective what it could mean for the European industry, not only necessarily financial sector, but how this could be also relevant for the corporates?
Well, thanks a lot, Martin. I hope the microphone is working, otherwise I should maybe speak up. Yeah, you're very welcome to blame me for everything. I'm used to that. Yeah, indeed, I'm not like a finance expert. The last project I worked on was our paper in March for the European Council on future industrial policy of the European Union. So, as a think tank of President Juncker, our function is also very much to take up the weak signals and to ensure that they are heard loud and clear by the leadership of the Commission. So the question that you asked me, I see 2 main functions of the instrument. One is like this aspect of we need to have like an incentive function. There are clear investment needs, which are so substantial that, as you already pointed out, Martin, they cannot be covered by the public fund. They rely on a cooperation and they rely on private investment. That's one aspect. And the other structural aspect I see is like to make the market more transparent in both dimensions. On the one side, of course, like for industry to provide opportunities and therefore also to give predictability. I think that's what industry really needs. Opportunities, but also like by pricing in risks that maybe sometimes be like in the current setup to be assessed on a too short-term basis. And so by having these indicators and having them integrated and made them clear, and with the taxonomy that you already referred to have a clear matrix basically in which different actors operate, we can make, I think, the market function better.
Thank you very much. Hannah, now I will turn to you. From the perspective of a very large company that I mentioned, I mean, obviously is an excellent example of a company that needs to transition from where you are now to meet your ambitious targets yourself. What kind of obstacles are you facing on the pathways, especially when it comes to the investment into research and innovation?
Sure, just a brief introduction. So BASF is the largest chemical company in the world, and the chemical sector in general plays quite a special role when it comes to climate protection. On the one hand, you all know that the chemical sector is one of the biggest emittents of CO2. On the other hand, we are the ones that can provide solutions to deliver the Paris Agreement or SDGs. You cannot imagine having energy efficiency of building without isolation materials. We cannot imagine having e-cars without batteries that we produce, or you cannot imagine solar power plants or wind turbines without chemicals. So it's, I think, very important to realize that for our sector, it's both limiting CO2 emission that we produce ourselves and helping other companies to become more sustainable. So coming to the first point about us producing less CO2 emissions, We have quite ambitious goal. By 2030, we would like to have a CO2 neutral growth. We've already halved our CO2 emission by doubling our production, so that the easy part, so-called, has been already done. Now we need huge transformative technologies to reach the goal that we have set for ourselves. To do so, of course, money is key. Money and research and innovation. So we have a project called Carbon Management Research Project, where we have 100 people sitting together and thinking how we can create a technology that will substantially reduce our emissions. We also have projects related to circular economy. I think it's very important to mention that sustainability, or this transition that we are now facing, it's not only about CO2 emissions, but also about plastics. Perfect example of our chemical recycling project is how to make plastic, give it a new life, transform plastic into a new material. For all that, I think taxonomy can help us a lot. We are big supporters of taxonomy, and we think that by creating this type of dictionary, we can definitely, as you said, shift part of the money available towards sustainable solutions. However, taxonomy by itself, it's not enough. I think we all strongly believe that innovation is the key, the right policy framework and regulatory framework, and thirdly, I'm happy to see also financial market representatives. I think there's a big obligation on their arms that they have to kind of shift this short-term profit-making thinking towards a long-term transitional, sustainable project. So that would be.
Anna, if I may push you a little bit, I mean,
Sure.
You said that you were thinking, or you are thinking, which is obviously very commendable, but we also need to talk about acting, and obviously BASF is obviously acting as well. But my question, if I can come back still a little bit on that, what kind of obstacles are you facing when you are acting? And
So,
are there any actions that we can take as policymakers to help you with that?
So definitely, one of the obstacles I think is from the financial markets perspective is this the paradigm shift, how you invest and what you invest for. The certain level of obstacle is also coming from a governmental perspective. Just to give you a short example, BASF currently is using 1% of all German energy for our power plant in Ludwigshafen, which is the biggest chemical power plant in the world. One of our ideas is to, instead of using gas or petrol, to use renewable energy and renewable electricity. So far, this renewable electricity is not available. So we will have to all work together, especially governments, to think about electricity as the key priority for sector to become more sustainable. I think that would be.
Thank you. I mean, let's follow up on that also bilaterally. Gwen, let's proceed to you. BNP has been one of the leading banks in the area of sustainable finance. We are very, very encouraged to see the positive developments. You didn't wait for the regulators to tell you, please start doing something on sustainable finance. Nevertheless, over the last 12 months, we have done a lot. We are basically preparing the first blueprint of taxonomy, the EU Green Bond Standard, the other tools such as low carbon benchmarks. How do these developments actually matter to you? I mean, how are you adjusting it? Do you find them useful? I mean, is it going in the right direction? Is it enough as well? Is it enough from our side?
It's never enough, right? So I think as a bank, I always start my conversation with, sustainability is mainstream now, right? It's all part of our individual existence. It's how we consume. It's how we vote. And as a bank and as a financial institution, we at BNP Paribas really feel, or at least I personally feel, and I know our top management and a lot of the people there feel, that we want to have a bank or be a bank that will be able to tell our children or the future generation on what it is that we're doing and know that we're working towards a more sustainable future. So that's my canned answer, right? But beyond that is, what are we really doing about it? What's the action? And what have we done in the last couple of years? So in the last couple of years, we created this company engagement direction. So that's the department that I'm in. And my job is really to work with the various businesses that we have and work on transforming internally and promoting the risk and opportunities that's associated within sustainable finance. So we've used the UN SDGs as a common framework for our engagement strategy. We have 168 billion that we put within SDG financing in 2018. And what's brilliant about the SDGs is because we're in so many different regions and we have various different businesses that's has different regulations, it provides us with a universal framework, and it has measurable impact goals that we can start working towards. And I think that's what's been great about the European Commission and the policy work that you guys have been doing lately is it gives us the 4 things that we need as a financial institution. And this is something that Benjamin also, I've pronounced it wrong, but he did it right. The 4 different things that we really need as financial institutions, right? And what our clients and investors and whatnot are looking for. So that's transparency, a common framework, we have guidelines, and a level playing field. And we see that this, the European Commission and the policies that you've enacted has really been a springboard in terms of the conversation that's happening globally as well. Because 2 weeks ago, I was in Paris at the PRI in-person day. So we heard from the Japanese regulators, Australian regulators, Canadian regulators, and I'm sure there were other countries in there that I've forgotten. Last week, I was in Singapore talking to the regulators. And what's heartening to see is that everybody's kind of moving towards the same direction in terms of mainstreaming sustainable finance. There's just different starting blocks, right? And in all this, I think finance really is a lever because we act as an intermediary. And I think this panel alone is like proof in the pudding of where we stand, because we're partnering with Solar Impulse on, it's part of the due diligence, some of the partners that you guys are working on and to innovate on the solutions. We've been working very closely with BASF on things like the natural capital work group that they're spearheading. One of my colleagues, Helena Vines Fiestas, was part of the TEG group with Dawn, and then we've been working very closely with the European Commission on this. So that's my long-winded answer to your short question.
Okay, thank you very much, Gwen. I think that, don't worry, I mean, in the second round, I will also ask some more controversial questions where we can disagree. I mean, you didn't constitute this panel to praise each other. Alexandra, we hear very often from investors that there is a lack of kind of projects that are sustainable, that there is only a very small number of sustainable projects to invest in. Would you agree with this first? And second, how can those sustainable projects can be put on the radar screen of those investors better? I mean, or not necessarily commission, but what can be done about making those projects more visible for the investors community?
Okay, so I agree that investors complain, that's true. I was until yesterday evening in New York for the UN Climate Summit, and when you meet with the Bill Gates Foundation or DiCaprio, they're all telling you, look, we're missing the project pipelines. So I agree they complain, but I don't agree there is not enough project. Maybe the fact is that it's not yet on their radar. So this is precisely why after Bertrand Piccard completed its round the world with a solar aircraft, he decided to create the Solar Impulse Foundation with one objective: becoming the voice of all those innovators that are unknown, because too small, because they don't have the PR capacity, the communications one. So Bertrand Piccard is, he's a pioneer, he's always functioning with crazy goals. So he said, okay, I will bring to the world 1,000 solutions, fine. So is it a long list of solutions? This could not happen because this wouldn't have been credible. So we decided to stop for a year our work, and we created a label so that we can bring only labelized solution and credibility to the investors, to the fund managers that we're speaking to. So we have installed a label whereby when a solution comes to us, they have to fill a file, and their dossier is given to 2 independent experts working in parallel. And if both of them agree on this solution to pass through, then they will go to BNP Paribas, our partners, so that's BNP is assessing the financial sustainability of the solution, because the two criteria for a solution to be labelized is to be A, financial sustainable, and B, sustainable. And then they receive the label. And we've been extremely pleased with the collaboration with DG Research, because your colleagues have been working hand in hand with us. And so far, we have a pipeline of projects of 250 projects that we gathered in a year and 2 months' time, all labelized out of 780 applications, so it's quite scarce. So we have projects that are both financially sustainable and sustainable. So they are projects, and we are here, like others, we're not the only one. You also have the drawdown project, but we are here to bring these solutions to the investors and to the fund manager. And we are an NGO because we do it for free.
Oh, okay. Well, that's impressive, but I mean, in light of the scale of the problem, I mean, is it enough? I mean, what you are doing is great, but I mean, would it be enough given that we hear so many complaints that the lack of project is really a big problem for investors? So if you say that there are really very many, should, I don't know, somebody, even policymakers, I mean, do something about it also from the public sector point of view? Would you like us, I mean, to also do something, or would you prefer that we leave it really to the private sector and we don't intervene? I'm just interested in your view on that.
Well, I think it's super important. The thing is that for the European Commission, you're stuck in so many policies, constraints. You going for projects, not for solutions. You have to, a project needs to be taken care by at least 3 countries representing different So it's so, I mean, your rules, and it's good there are rules, but your rules are so difficult that for you as a policymaker it's difficult. So maybe for some member states or other institutions or foundations, yes, there is room, and I hope we will be copied and again.
Okay. Well, thank you. Dawn, I will finish the first round with you. I mean, can you tell the audience a little bit more about what the technical expert group is helping the Commission with? And I would not only ask you, I mean, to say in simple terms, I mean, how important the work is, but also if you can say from your honest point of view, because you have been really instrumental, and you see many also shortcomings and the challenges on the way, what the challenges are going forward with some of those tools. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Martin. Yes, so I've been a member of the TEG since June 2018, and our mandate was increased to December. What are the 4 areas? Well, you are all probably familiar with the HLAG and the action plan, which is a 10-point action plan. We're helping in 4 areas. One, which is the very first action, is to build a taxonomy. The second area is to develop green bond standards. The third area, I notice my thing is none. Sorry about that. The third area is to develop standards for benchmarks, and these are monitoring solutions that the investing community use. And the final area is around disclosures for corporates, so that the finance industry have the access to data on what companies are doing and what their strategies are, and how they're achieving the objectives of the taxonomy. So I'll say a little bit about what is the taxonomy. Perhaps most of you are familiar with it, but effectively, as this is the area I'm working on, I'm most familiar with it. There are 6 environmental objectives that we're working on. The first 2, climate change, mitigation and adaptation. We're setting substantial contribution criteria. These are thresholds and metrics where we can quantitative, qualitative, if we are unable to achieve quantitative, to identify what is a substantial contribution to sustainability by an economic actor within an economic activity. And we're defining these on economic activity level. The other 4 areas, which are pollution control, water resource management, circular economy and biodiversity, are at a lower threshold of do no significant harm. And ultimately, when the taxonomy is built out, an operator will be able to deem themselves and share this information with the financial community as sustainable if they achieve substantial contribution in one of the 6 objectives and do no significant harm in the other 5. When we leave off in December, there will be 2 substantial contributions on mitigation and adaptation, and then 6 do no significant harms, and then the platform will continue the work from the technical expert group. So what are the challenges? Well, a lot of people would say, how can you define sustainable? And it is quite difficult. In the climate mitigation, of course, carbon dioxide emissions are key, greenhouse gas emissions. So in this case, we've used whatever our market practices as much as possible. For example, the ETS thresholds are used. In other cases, we're looking at other state-of-the-art criteria to apply. For adaptation, this is very context and location specific, and it really is going to be for the actor to undertake an assessment of their own operations and then declare this through their disclosures. And then on do no significant harm, I can tell you there are many, many different factors to be considered. Some are already have quite a lot of regulation around them, for example, pollution control. Others, for example, circular economy is very much practice-based. And so many times we'll see qualitative requirements under do no significant harm because of the difficulty in pinpointing a single quantitative factor. So, so this is how we've worked through it in the last 12 to 18 months. And I'd say that that has been our single biggest challenge. We wanted to achieve quantitative. We had to accept we could not have quantitative criteria all the way through. Yeah, so that really is it. And I mean, obviously, I have to say a word or two about green bonds. Yep. I say that this is economic activity area, but we're working building the taxonomy so that we can give the tools to the green bond community, to the companies who want to issue green bonds around your activities, so that you can ring fence. It might be a project from a company. It may not be the entire entity that will achieve sustainability, and they will set the boundaries around that and will issue a green bond. And then they could potentially use the funds from the green bond to reinvest back into their activities to achieve further sustainability in their other operations in accordance with their long-term strategy and trajectory for zero carbon economy. So that is one example of how the taxonomy would be applied.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dawn. I mean, we can have a whole afternoon or a whole weekend on taxonomy and the green bond. I just seen also the slide which suggests that there is a half of the audience that has not yet been aware is the Action Plan on Sustainable Finance. So I am aware that the discussion on taxonomy, because it's a fairly complex issue, can be a little bit Chinese for some of you, but those of you who are interested and who would like to get a little bit more details, either Dawn or me, I mean, would be obviously happy to follow up. Now I would like to open the second round. I would start with Gwen. I also, I mean, again, I don't want to have paint everything on you know, so optimistic and everything is perfect. Can you tell us a little bit what is really dragging you down when you really want to make a difference on the ground? What are the obstacles from your perspective? And I already assume that you will tell me data from the corporates. Then I will then already preempt your answer, and I will ask you additional question. If the data from the corporates are not sufficient, what it is that you would like to see more, and what the corporates can do to facilitate your intention to invest more sustainably yourself.
Okay, that was a lot of questions. Let me
Yes.
challenges. First, challenges, and let me tackle challenges, and then afterwards, the second question was what investors are looking for. Was that what it was?
What you are looking
What I
for
am
in terms
looking
of
for.
data from the, I guess that you would tell me that you are lacking data from the corporates. I get this is a very common
It's
theme that we
one
hear.
of the challenges, yeah.
Yes,
But
and-
it's too simple of an answer, like you're saying. So I think
Okay.
if I boil it down, the first concern from our clients and from the public is really, are they greenwashing? Right? So then this gets down to disclosure. Then it gets down to data and transparency, clear. They're like, okay, we don't have an apples to apples comparison. It's really hard to get. And then everybody will complain about it. And then so all these legacy systems, it's really hard to pull. But our point is we have to start from somewhere. Disclosures is necessary. I think that in terms of data, if we start with voluntary disclosures to begin with, and we can slowly move on to something else, maybe that's a solution. From a research and innovation standpoint, if I take a specific example of a corporate, right? One of the main FMCG type corporates that we're looking at, they're struggling with their supply chain management. And it boils down to data, because it boils down to the traceability of the different products. It boils down to within where they have invested in. If it's in smallholder farms, is there deforestation happening? So then this is where technology can tie in. And technology is, again, just a tool. It will help, but it's not the be-all, end-all savior of it all. It's just one of the factors that need to be there, that we need to incentivize in order to address these type of issues. And I think in terms of what we as a bank are looking for, we're really looking at what our clients are looking at. So if you're an investor, one of the challenges that we hear and that it's been pointed out in the panel was we don't have enough in the pipe because everything is too small, or there's just not enough, and institutional investors are scrambling for green investments or sustainable investments. So what's a potential solution to that is we're exploring, and we've started putting together securitization, so within a blended finance model, where we're using multi-development banks as guarantees, because then it makes the product from a risk-return perspective more palatable to big institutions. So this can range from pension funds all the way to ultra-high net worth individuals, and potentially maybe down to the retail market. And then you have the corporates, because they are getting an off-take product that is sustainable for their supply chain. You have the ultimate beneficiaries and the smallholder farmers or other small projects that will ultimately benefit from the funneling of capital into this process.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Now, Hannah, what are the incentives for you to invest into more innovation, research, and sustainability?
Sure.
What is driving you? And since Gwen mentioned also the need for data and information, how can we balance this need from the investors with the possible costs that you would entail, because you would have to disclose some information yourself?
So just on incentives. So I would put it in three baskets, I would say. First is just reality. A simple example, last year we had to close part of our production plant due to the lowest ever level of Rhine River. And we expect that those kind of events will happen more and more. So I think reality faces us all, and actions are immediate because it's matter of existence for companies and for individuals. A second big basket comes from customers, our customers. We feel more and more that they actually demand sustainable solutions, and that our sustainable solutions are the most profitable ones. So there is some sort of a win-win situation. That's why a couple of years ago we created something which is called Sustainable Solution Steering, where we analyze all our products, the entire value chain, and we put them in different categories to kind of facilitate the whole process. The most sustainable one, they're called accelerators. And by doing so, we not only steer individual solutions, but we steer the entire portfolio, because we made it very clear last year, by 2025, we want to sell 25 billion of them, and we are now selling 15. So there's a big journey ahead of us. So I think the customer's perspective is very important. The second one that I've mentioned is the reality. And the third one of incentives comes from policymakers and for regulators. I would like to also thank the Commission in general for your fantastic effort when it comes to Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, the ETS investment fund, and the new projects related to a common European interest project. I think this tool should be very much promoted. It's an excellent example how throughout the entire value chain we can do something good with different member states, with companies, with the Commission on board. A simple example from our sector is the battery alliance, where we work all together to kind of counterbalance the Chinese domination in this sector and build a strong sustainable product, meaning e-vehicles. So I think those are the three big incentives. And concerning the reporting part, I might surprise you, we are not against. We very much like reporting. We started in the 60s with social reporting, so that was 60 years ago. In the 80s, we created an environmental reporting. Since 2007, we have integrated reporting, and we very much promote integrated reporting. I think it should never be a part in the separate part. It should be part of the financial reporting, because climate and social aspects are as important as numbers that companies are giving to the public. And one more point, it's on EFRAG. I would encourage you to also look at their work. EFRAG is part of the European Union structure, and they are working now. BSF is a partner of Lab, where best examples on reporting are analyzed, and there will be some report coming out relatively soon. And the last point is on TCFD, and I very much welcome the Commission's idea to include TCFD in reporting, especially linking it to taxonomy, and I think that's the way to go. How to make it a bit more global. There is already something available, and TCFD puts most of the effort on climate, so I think that's a...
Thank you. On that one, I will have a follow-up question. We have already introduced the TCFD work into the non-binding guidelines of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, which obviously the guidelines are not mandatory, but they are encouraging companies, the big listed companies, to disclose not only how climate affects them, but also the impact of those corporations on the climate. How would you feel about making some of those information or data that we have suggested to be, for the timing, voluntary, mandatory?
So this double materiality that you just mentioned, that we not only analyze how climate impacts us, but also how we impact climate. So I think that's a very innovative step that the European Commission is taking, and I think very important to analyze. We adopted TCFD last year in November, so we will include it in our reporting from next year, most likely. I think there's still one missing point, how taxonomy will be part of the whole project and whole reporting requirements on companies. We know that for now there's no obligation that companies will have to disclose based on taxonomy, but I think sooner or later we'll have to try to learn ourselves how taxonomy can steer our reporting.
There is already a link in the guidelines to the taxonomy, where companies would be encouraged to report, for instance, what is the percentage of the revenues that they are generating from the activities that would be on the taxonomy list, or what would be the projects, also forward-looking, that would also basically be taxonomy compliant. But my question was still, I mean, if there is somebody who argues, and I'm not saying necessarily the Commission here, let's make those data requirements mandatory. What would you say?
Well, we have the Non-Financial Reporting Directive is a directive. It's mandatory. So whatever you put there, companies have to oblige. I think so. If you make guidance compulsory, companies will have to include them in their non-financial reporting. So I think that's a bit of a different perspective. I think as long as it's there, it's there. I think there's no question of yes or no any longer.
Okay, so you are saying basically that you might not see challenges in reporting what is suggested in the guidelines.
Of course, it depends how it's phrased. But I think as long as it's a level playing field, that what's included there, everybody has to comply, preferably at the global level, because I think most of the companies are operating on a global level, so we would like to see a similar exercise being taken in other parts of the world. But
okay, thank you. Gwen, you want to intervene?
I think I just want to point out it is definitely essential, but we have to weigh that as well on the amount or the burden that's created in terms of these mandatory disclosures. And I agree with the fact that it has to be global and has to be some sort of common principle framework around it.
Okay. Alexandra, you mentioned a number of projects that are existing that might not get funding yet. There are obviously a number of innovative and sustainable businesses with high potential. how can we make these companies more attractive for public-private investments? I mean, we are talking quite a lot now about the private investments, but there might be also some projects that would be, I don't know, big, that where also the public investment might need to be involved. Feel free to answer either on the private or public or the combination, but how can we make those companies more attractive for investments?
So I'd like to take the other angle, the one of these innovators. So I'd like you to imagine that you just left Solvay Business School. You denied every high-level position to take a risk and run your business, right? You managed to have 3 people around you, and then you need money. But you're not a financial specialist, right? But you need money to scale up. So you don't need big tickets. You don't need a lot of money. So at the EU level, either you have the choice to go to the SME fund, right? But you don't want subsidized because you're a risk taker. You just want money that is cheap. Or you can go to the EIB. The smallest portion of money that you can get at the EIB is 15 million. You don't need 15 million. You just need, I don't know, 500K, 1 million. And you don't have the time to go to either or. You need the banks or public funding to be equipped to tackle the needs of these people and to support them, because they don't have the time to lose one man day every day to spend their time on this. They don't have this time. So that's one. Second, these people, most of the time, they have the prototype. Sometimes it's even already commercialized. They need a traction effect, a pull effect. And this is where corporates can enter into the play, because they need some support for the industrialization of their product. And they don't have the capacity to do that. This is where corporate can play a big role in supporting those innovators to move to the next phase. And without the combination of cheap money and pull effect, they won't be able to deploy their solution, which are most of the time profitable and clever, easy to deploy. So it's a shame that, in a way, capitalism, as it functions now, is killing, first, its clients, meaning the people, and B, is actually killing the innovators that are flourishing all around Europe and all around the world. So it's, I mean, I'm super happy about the taxonomy and all the work that the European Commission has done, but it's not enough. We have to move faster and to allow all those people to actually deploy their innovation. Today, it's not only research day, it's innovation days. These people have to be supported and enabled to move to the next phase.
What concretely, I mean, if you were in the shoes of the next vice president in charge of this portfolio, what concretely would you propose in terms of concrete action? Because, I mean, I do see the need, I mean, to do something, but your answer suggested it must be really very transformational, something big. So,
well, either you have to work with commercial banks so that they agree and they have the capacity to take this risk, either you have to create another EIB that could address small businesses, which is not the case for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, we have the proposal of the Climate Investment Bank. I mean,
yeah, but the size of the ticket is too big.
Okay. Well, I take it with me. I mean, that's very good that you mentioned that. I also want you, I mean, to say, look, I mean, what has been done is great, but I mean, we need to adjust, we need to do a little bit more, I mean, here and there, and you are suggesting we don't need to do a little bit more, we need to do a lot more. Dawn, on how the taxonomy could help here, I mean, in simple language, because it's very kind of complex issue, how taxonomy can help companies to attract more capital. Because the taxonomy normally is, in the minds of people, something that is, in the first place, done for the financial sector, for the investors, but can taxonomy be usefully used by the corporates?
Thank you. Yes, and my thinking is stretching along from the small innovator SME right up to the multinational corporate. If I may, I'll address all of that range. So the taxonomy is there to give the financial community a tool to understand what is sustainable. But what is sustainable? What does that mean? It means that a company is aware of their risks, they're aware of how the climate impacts them, how they impact the climate, their resource limitations across their entire value chain. They understand about their own use of resources and waters, their impact on biodiversity. And so this is a complex, interrelated set of objectives, as we term it in the taxonomy, that a company needs to be aware of. And many companies are. I mean, we hear, BASF is very aware of their sustainability requirements. But now we've got criteria. We've now started to allow the financial community to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. Not all industry might agree with this. They might prefer if we had other criteria, but we have these criteria now. And so that means that companies, the larger established companies, can start evaluating their current business model and their strategy for the future and ask themselves the question, are we aligned with the taxonomy? And this might be quantitative thresholds, or it might be in the case of climate resilience or adaptation. Are we aware of our risks, and have we put in measures in place to do them? And what kind of funding do we need? Do we need insurance for this? Will we get insurance for this? And so now the taxonomy is like a discussion table. And now you can start there and say, well, I'm the business owner, I'm a multinational corporate, or I'm a small innovator, I have this great idea, it's really sustainable, it fits right down into water objective, substantial contribution, and in fact it substantially contributes to a lot of other objectives, which we will almost expect new innovations to do. And then your financier is sitting at the other side, and that's when that dialogue happens, and you're saying, well, this is my piece, and this is what I have to offer. And then the financier is able to have that dialogue and decide, well, this is a solution that I can offer to you. And this solution could be to enhance the capital structure of the organization. It could be a green bond, which might be issued at a project level, or it might be equity investments, or it might be insurance, a risk type of a financial instrument. Or again, it might be something non-traditional, if I may, say crowdfunding, and that you're then putting forward on a platform how you're achieving the sustainability objectives. And so that's what this taxonomy is trying to do. It's not perfect, it's dynamic, it's going to move, but it is a very, very useful tool.
Thank you very much, Joan. Last question in this round, and I will open the floor to the audience. To you, Benjamin, I mean, how would you react to the call from Alexandra to do much more than what we are doing? Not a little bit more, but much more. What's next? What should we do? What would you advise us now as the DG in charge of sustainable finance to do? And also, I think that somebody mentioned the issue of the level playing field, that some of the companies, and not only in the financial sector, but in the corporates, might be now subject to higher standards. Well, this is not the case elsewhere. What shall we do? I mean, at the international level, then.
Indeed, I hope the microphone is not working. Indeed, I think we need to take a step back and actually realize in which period of time we actually are. We just start a new policy cycle. This is now exactly the time to think big, to ask the right questions, and to come forward with bold ideas. And we've already seen the announcement, political guidelines by President-elect von der Leyen with the Green Deal. That is really promising. Now, my role here today is not to announce anything, but also to raise some questions. And we also in the EPSC, we also had a brainstorming session about what could be actually questions that could be asked in that respect, and to really think out of the box. And I also wonder what your opinion on that is. If you, for example, look into terms of monetary policies. Should climate change or sustainability considerations also be part of monetary policy? Second question, do the EU state aid rules and procurement rules, are they actually consistent with our climate objectives in this respect? Do they hamper the transition towards a new economic model? Third question, the prudential rules and the capital and liquidity requirements that we have for banks and insurances. Do they actually have adequate pricing risks in this respect? Fourth one, the risk assessment provisions. Are they sufficiently forward-looking, or are they too backward-looking in that respect? Fifth one, accounting rules. If you think big in this respect, like pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, public-private partnerships, do we have a sufficient integration of sustainability concerns? And last point, and that was also raised in in the discussion with Madame Lagarde, is there a broader role for European supervisory authorities like the European Banking Authority, European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority, and the European Securities and Market Authorities? Is it within their mandate to take these concerns more into account?
Thank you, Benjamin. I've made notes, and I'm sure that we will also talk bilaterally. I think it's time to open the floor to the audience for questions. I guess that we have some questions on the slides,
on the table.
or I mean, or shall we take it from the audience? Yeah. So maybe gentleman over there.
Okay.
I will pass the microphone to you, and we will share one here.
I can usually manage. It shouldn't be a problem. My name is Axel Mjøs. I'm teaching sustainable finance at the master level at the Norwegian School of Economics in Bergen. And that's not easy. Because the main sustainability thing for a company is to survive. If the company doesn't survive financially, there's no sustainable or double or triple bottom line to deliver. So maybe a question for you in terms of the taxonomy. Does it give any guidance as to the trade-offs when you need to trade off between financial and other objectives, and also this thing about integrated reporting? I've been teaching about that, but it's just that you put everything in one PDF. Thank you very much. It doesn't help anything in terms of the trade-offs or the deeper understanding of how things are connected.
Yeah.
So I hope you're doing something to that.
Well, okay, so we're working with the architecture that we've been asked to. So our remit is to set criteria. I'll be straight with you. We give a rationale for it. We do an awful lot of research around it. We brought in hundreds of experts. We didn't do this on our own. There's 12 of us out of the 35. But what I would say is you seem to be dividing a line between what is environmentally sustainable and financially sustainable. So in my mind, there is no division. If you are environmentally sustainable, you're financially sustainable. It's a prerequisite. Now, this has yet to be brought into our, well, it is being brought into the Solvency II, the IOPA, all of the requirements for ESMA and all the engagement that the Commission have on the other 9 action points. But the fact is, a company of today will not be considered sustainable, and one of tomorrow will definitely not be sustainable unless they have taken into consideration the risks around climate and also what they're doing. Because if they're not sustainable, they're spreading unsustainable activities around. So in a way, it has to be dealt with. They're not contributing to the business world or to the social world that we want for our future generations. And so at some point that has to stop. And the disclosures is one way, because then you are exerting market pressure. You're not necessarily saying you can't do that, you can't do that, and then everyone's saying, well, we've so many laws on us, how can we manage all this? So what you're doing is you're saying to companies, disclose and tell us what you're doing. And I don't know if you use the word integrated or how you want to achieve it. I think our disclosures report provides very good guidance. But to me, the point is you get your facts out there, and there's no lack of transparency around it. And then everyone, the financial community, people that are using your products in the supply chain can decide, are you fit for purpose for where I want to be in 10 years? And that's the question all businesses should be asking of one another. Are you fit for purpose? Are you going to bring me down if I do business with you? Are you going to bring me up? And that's what banks and the financial community are asking, and you need to ask it of yourselves.
Just in terms of asset management and what our institutional investors are looking at, this is a question that we're asking to a lot of the corporates already within our asset management, is to say, what are the activities that you have that are sustainable? What is your board diversification? What is it that you're doing now in terms of your processes? But beyond that, there has to be accountability beyond just the disclosure of it all. So we follow up and we say, okay, did you disclose your scope 1, scope 2, and your scope 3? What are you doing in order to get to the future commitments that you've made? So if I'm a capital intensive industry and I say that I want to become net zero by 2050, but I'm not in green tech today, what am I doing within my CapEx investments internally in order to get there? So that's one. And I think it's also good to point out a practical example of how we're using taxonomy within financial instruments, because I think that's probably really interesting based on where you are today. There's been a lot of talk in that the taxonomy is binary, but it's really not binary, as Dawn pointed out, because it gives you that level to say in this specific sector, where you traditionally wouldn't issue a green bond because it's not in a sector that's green. I have now set, or the taxonomy has now set a point that says this is green. So it's given me a path to transition. So if we're creating a transition bond, which we just did recently, or a sustainability-linked loan, which has become kind of a baseline product, then I can link those KPIs into that path to transition.
Thank you, Gwen. Somebody else would like to ask a question. Yes, please.
So my name is Mathieu. I work for NG, former GDF Suez. My question would be, in this exercise of taxonomy, basically what you're trying to do is to segregate between what is a green investment from what is not so much a green investment. It gets into a very colorful debate about what is gray, what is dark investment, etc. Ideally, this is supposed to build a path towards green transition. However, by directing this, by laying out this path, aren't you also putting aside some technologies which are promising, which we will not have the time to develop? So what I have in mind, for instance, is elements such as biogas, who can enable to close the loop. However, in an exercise of taxonomy for the moment, they would be considered as a gray investment, while they definitely support also the energy transition. So I guess it's not so much a question, but also, let's say, an addition in the conversation about how are you not discriminating technologies which are relevant for the energy transition by doing this exercise of taxonomy? Thank you.
Okay, so firstly, as we say in the taxonomy, we are putting forward what's a green or a deep green, if that's the term that's being used. But we're not saying what's not there is not green. And the financial community themselves can make decisions around, well, actually, do you know what? I really want to invest in this particular type of technology, albeit that it's not there. It may be the case that they foresee when the taxonomy is completed that the actor might have an opportunity to be deemed sustainable under one of the other objectives. So, you know, there's still a lot of different angles to be taken into consideration. But also, we are technology neutral. But at the same time, of course, there are certain criteria that have to be met, and if they're not going to be met, then they're not included in the thresholds that we've set. So, I mean, we really are limited for time as well. You know, we were 12 people starting on 65 subsectors, so we had to manage our decisions very critically.
Yes, yeah, I confirm, obviously, what you have done over the last year was impressive. Nevertheless, nobody claims that this work is undone. I mean, it's by far not. You do need to work much harder in coming years. Last question, if somebody really has a pressing need.
Can I rebound on something?
Yes, please.
I have mine.
You have the mic.
I would like to rebound on what Benjamin said when you asked about what the EU could do more. The work on taxonomy is certainly impressive, so is the decision of the EIB to stop investment in fossil fuel. But then you mentioned state aid. I mean, this is where the Commission is so powerful. So could we please align what you're doing on taxonomy and the state aid policy? This is super important to be as comprehensive and to have this in the Green New Deal, because you cannot go on with the stated guidelines as they are now, supporting some highly polluting industry. I mean, use will not allow that anymore. So I think it's extremely important to align as well. And thank you for pointing it out.
Thank you, Alexandra. It is on our radar screen, I confirm. I mean, not that Commission, I cannot also announce anything for the next Commission, but this deserves a discussion, as also Benjamin said. I should really close the panel, but before doing that, I still would like to give you, each of you, the possibility to say in 1 or 2 sentences any key message or takeaway from the discussion we just had. Very simple to the audience. Please go ahead. Alexandra, do you want to start yourself? You were already very...
Yeah, I think I've done enough.
Yeah, just very briefly, everybody on board. I think there are still quite few that are not yet fully on board with the sustainable finance discussion. So those panels, especially SMEs, I think we should have more of those discussions with SMEs. And how to link innovation and sustainable finance. So a role for the Horizon Europe to link it better.
Yeah, the ultimate purpose of the financial system is to ensure that our savings and our financial flows go into sustainable activities for the future, for future generations. And even though the taxonomy is there, it needs the real actors in the economy to actually use it and to engage and use it to either develop new technologies, to scale up existing technologies, to build bridges and communication, and use it as a risk assessment tool as well. And I feel that there's been great moves in Europe. We have our Commission, our Parliament, our Council coming together on this. So we have, the mandate from our institutions. We have the need, the physical need from everything we know about what's happening with climate change and also resource inefficiencies. And we have the know-how. And it's how to bring all of that together. So with the mandate and the money, we want to get moving.
Thank you, Dawn. Gwen?
I think what the work that the European Commission has done is commendable. The work that the people here in the panel is commendable. Everybody in the room is commendable. However, it's not enough, and we have to go faster. So how are we going to get there? I think the only way to get there is really, we're more than the sum of our parts, so to speak. So coalitions is key, and finance is a lever. I just wanted to answer two of your questions, which I thought could kind of be useful from some of the discussions that we've been having. Is that on the first part, in terms of monetary policy, there should be a discussion with the central banks on the assets that they're investing in. Mm-hmm. And then second on, I just lost my train of thought, but I'll tell you off. It was important. I lost.
Procurement? No?
No.
No? Benjamin, let's take it bilaterally afterwards. Benjamin, the word is yours.
From my side, just an invitation. I think we have an enormous amount of competence here in the room. And now is the time to come forward with ideas. So if you have ideas, if you want to feed in something, please be in contact. I think I can say that also for you and your team. We're all looking forward to hearing your ideas.
Well, thank you very much to you all. You have been really extremely insightful. And I hope that also the audience has enjoyed this discussion. And those of you who are interested in the subject, we would be very happy to stay in touch and hear your suggestions. Thank you very much.